At the haunted edge of the solar system, we discovered sinister secrets that exposed our fate. Night fell heavy over the quiet suburb outside of Phoenix, Arizona. The stars twinkled like cold eyes watching from a distance, but Laura had no time to admire them. After hours of long shifts at the gas station, she trudged home, exhaustion etched into every line of her face. She was a single mother, molded by the grind of life and the weight of two young hearts, the burning need to provide for her children, Megan and Kyle, but tonight, as she stepped through the front door, a chill raced down her spine. The flickering light from the television cast erratic shadows across the walls, creatures of obscurity dancing ominously. Megan stood frozen in the hallway, her wide eyes darting nervously. "Mom, there's something here." Laura scoffed, brushing off her daughter's concern like dust on a shelf. "Kids had wild imaginations, right? It's just the TV. Go to bed." But a flicker of doubt coiled around her heart. The shadows seemed to pulse, inching closer with her every step. The timid whisper of the night wrapped around her, and she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. As days melted into each other, strange happenings began to mar their once peaceful home. Megan, driven by an insatiable curiosity, had discovered the telescope left abandoned in the attic, along with unsettling notes penned in her late father's shaky handwriting. The messages spoke of haunting presences and threats at the edge. Each whispered word felt like a raven's croak echoing through the house, grating against her nerves. What did her father know? What had he seen? "Mom." Megan's voice trembled, breaking the silence one evening. "Something is listening. I can feel it. It watches us." With every rational excuse Laura tried to give, visions of ghosts and whispers crowded her thoughts. Fear culminated in laughter, but heartfelt dread festered beneath it. It wasn't long before the nights consumed them. Shadowy figures flitted across the windows, and whispers slithered through the air, choking any brief moments of peace they dared to savor. The sensation of unseen eyes clawing at them turned into a thick, suffocating blanket. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. That night, the atmosphere shifted palpably. Laura's instincts screamed, it felt stronger and darker, grabbing at the edges of her sanity. The neighbor, Mr. Stevens, seemed amiable enough, but every smile of his stretched thin and revealed something sinister lurking behind. He always knew too much, his eyes lingering just long enough to plant restless seeds of doubt. What was he hiding? Just as Laura felt they were on the verge of uncovering some twisted truth, the night exploded into chaos. An overwhelming force tore through their safe haven. Neighboring families were ensnared, screams became a familiar dirge. Dark silhouettes spilled out from doorways like ink pouring from a broken bottle. Laura found herself clutching her children, hearts pounding wildly. The suburban landscape twisted into a grotesque mockery of normalcy, shadows taunting her. Amid screams, her realization struck cold and true. Mr. Stevens wasn't just their neighbor. He was a warden of the horror that thrived on their vulnerabilities, concealing a malevolence that drained hope and suffocated safety. With nowhere left to seek refuge, they dashed down the cracked pavement. Every terrified glance revealed that their suburban utopia was a breeding ground for monsters, masked by friendly faces. This time, the darkness of their reality began to claw not just at the edges, but deep into the marrow of who they were. Would Laura and her children escape this nightmare? Only the void of the night would know. The pavement felt hot beneath their feet, as if the ground itself conspired against them. Laura's heart pounded like a drum. "Keep running," she urged, glancing back at the flickering lights of their neighborhood. But the houses were no longer familiar. They loomed like headstones in a graveyard, shadows pooling at the doorways, ready to claim another victim. Mom!" Kyle cried, his small hand slipping from hers as he stumbled. Panic flared in her chest. She scooped him up with one arm, her other hand gripping Megan tightly. They poured their energy into the sprint, where each breath felt like sucking in shards of glass. A scream sliced through the air, a sound so raw it seemed to shake the very essence of the night. "Over there!" Megan yelled, pointing to a sliver of light from a nearby house. It flickered like a beacon of hope amidst overwhelming chaos. Laura hesitated. Instinct screamed to keep running, but the desperate look on her children's faces compelled her to act. "We can't go home," but maybe. She pushed forward toward the light, the children close at her side. They lunged inside. The living room was a neat, unassuming space, a stark contrast to the horror saturating the streets outside. A family photo hung on the wall, happy faces smiling in frames of warmth, blissfully unaware of the darkness lurking beyond their doors. "Hello?" Laura called, her voice quaking. "Is anyone here?" The silence that followed seemed to stretch. Then, it broke. A creak echoed from the hallway, a hesitant sound that reverberated in the stillness. The hairs on Laura's neck stood up. "Stay close," she whispered, backing toward what she hoped was safety. A figure emerged, draped in shadows. Mr. Stevens. His crooked smile sent chills down her spine. "Ah, you found shelter. Clever choice. Get away from us!" Laura shouted, her voice cracking. She shifted protectively in front of her children, adrenaline surging through her veins. "Oh, but you misunderstand," Mr. Stevens replied, his tone smooth yet sinister. "It's not me you need to fear. Not tonight, not when the real terror is out there." A low, guttural growl echoed outside the door. It was a sound born from the depths of nightmares, a cacophony that shifted the air, suffocating what little hope remained in Laura's heart. "They come for the weak, you see." They're seduced by fear. He took a step forward, a glint in his eyes. "And you, my dear Laura, have drawn them here." Megan covered her ears, and Kyle trembled against her leg. "Mom, what is happening?" he whimpered. "I don't know," she cried, feeling her sanity slip. Feet shuffled outside, scraping against the wooden deck. "What do we do?" "Protect your children," Stevens whispered, almost lovingly, "or join the others." The growl echoed louder, an ominous warning. The door vibrated as something pressed against it. "Megan, Kyle, follow me," Laura commanded, lunging toward the back of the house. They had to escape, away from whatever Mr. Stevens was hinting at, away from the monsters that lurked. Each step brought them closer to another door, but dread clawed at her mind. What if they dashed from one nightmare into another? As she reached for the doorknob, she hesitated just long enough to glance back at Mr. Stevens. His smile was wide, that of a predator. "Don't fight what you cannot escape," he taunted. Then the door burst open behind him. A shadow loomed larger than the sky above, and in that moment, Laura understood their fates were intertwined, bound to this cursed place. Darkness lunged forward, swallowing their screams in its insatiable maw. What waited on the other side of life and death? What truths would reveal themselves in the heart of fear? She could only hope the dawn would come, but would they see it? The back door creaked open, revealing a darkened alley framed by overgrown weeds and shadows that seemed to shift of their own accord. Laura hesitated, her hand trembling on the knob. Instinct told her to turn back, but a louder voice urged her forward. "Come on. Mom, I don't want to go out there," Kyle pleaded, his little body shaking against her side. "We have to." Laura squeezed him tighter, feeling the weight of his fear pressing down on her. They stepped outside, the air thick with menace. The growl had morphed into a chorus of snarls, echoing off every wall like a sinister melody. Each sound made the hairs on Laura's arms stand on end. "Stay close," she whispered again, Gripping both children in a protective embrace. As they dashed through the narrow alley, darkness clawed at them, wrapping around their legs like creeping vines. Her heart raced, drowning out the sounds of the night. For a moment, she foolishly wished for the familiar flicker of streetlights, the mundane hum of suburban life, anything but this suffocating darkness. Over there. Megan pointed, her voice barely above a whisper. A broken streetlight flickered ahead, a pale illumination against the inky blackness. Let us go. It felt like a lifeline, pulling them toward a fragile chance at safety. As they neared, the light flickered erratically, filling Laura with dread. They reached the base of the streetlight just as its glow sputtered out completely. "Mom!" Kyle cried, panic flooding his voice. They were engulfed, shadows crushing them. Something moved in the darkness beyond, a slithering sound that curled around her spine. She could sense it watching, waiting, the cold breath of a predator brushing against her skin. "Run!" Laura shouted, knowing they had to move. With every step, fear gripped her harder. They sprinted to the end of the alley, where it opened up into a deserted street lined with houses, all of them draped in unnerving quiet. "Megan, Kyle, we need to make it to that house." Laura pointed across the street at a place that looked at first like an oasis in a desert of despair. A dull glow seeped from its windows. But even as she spoke, she felt the suffocating weight of dread. What if it was just another trap, like Stephen's home? The echo of claws scraping against concrete made her heart stutter. "Hurry!" They dashed across the street, footsteps pounding with urgency. As they reached the porch, the front door swung open, revealing a gaunt, wild-eyed man standing there. "Get in! Now!" he yelled, ushering them with urgency. They stumbled inside, and the man slammed the door shut behind them, pressing his back against it as if fighting an unseen force. Laura's relief was short-lived. The man turned, his face grim. "You shouldn't have come here. They can smell fear." "What do you mean?" Laura choked out, breathless. He shook his head, fear radiating from him. "There's no escaping them. They know. They're already here." A crash resounded outside, and the windows rattled. "What do we do?" Megan whimpered, clutching her brother. The man backed away, a look of sinking despair washing over him. "Find somewhere to hide. Their eyes are everywhere and they won't stop until they get you." Darkness loomed at the edges of the room. Laura felt her stomach drop. Through the wall, she could hear muffled growls and the gnashing of teeth. "Mom?" Kyle's voice trembled against her arm. "Will we be okay?" She wanted to say yes. She wanted to believe it. But as a bone-chilling howl echoed through the house, the truth hung heavy in the air. "Hide!" she screamed, shoving her children toward a nearby closet. The wooden door latched shut behind them just as the wall shuddered. Something was trying to break in, and in the darkness, the truth whispered, a haunting melody. What if the terror that loomed was merely waiting for them to embrace their own fear? As the door splintered under the pressure, Laura held her breath, realizing the fight for survival had just begun. Would they find a way out, or would they succumb to the very shadows that tormented them? The closet was small, its wooden slats barely blocking out the world beyond. Laura pressed her back against the door, holding her breath as her children huddled close beside her. The air was stale, clinging to their skin like a heavy fog. She could hear her heart pounding in her ears, each beat mingling with the distant howls that seemed to taunt them from outside. A vicious crash reverberated through the house. The man's frantic words replayed in her mind, "They can smell fear." Panic ignited fear like a match through gasoline. She shut her eyes, desperately wishing she could shield her children from whatever nightmare awaited them. "Mom?" Kyle's voice was barely a whisper, tremulous and small. She hushed, a finger pressed to her lips. She could feel his tiny frame shaking beside her, and it tore at her heart. "Why are they angry, Mom?" Megan asked, her voice trembling. The innocence in her words only deepened the terror that filled the closet. Just hold on tight, okay? Laura replied, the words feeling painfully inadequate. How do you explain terror to children? Suddenly, the sounds outside shifted. The growling morphed into a low, guttural voice that sent chills racing down her spine. Come out, wherever you are, it called, each word slithering through the cracks as though they were fingers reaching for them. Mom! I'm scared. Kyle whimpered. With each syllable that seeped into the closet, Laura felt the room constrict around them. Were they trapped? Could they leave? She needed to act, but fear was a chain, and it held her tightly. A crash echoed through the house, followed by a guttural roar that rattled the very foundations. A rush of wind slammed against the door, rattling the latch. Laura's breath hitched in her throat. They didn't have much time. Listen, Laura said, her voice barely above a whisper, I need you both to be very, very quiet, okay? We have to wait until it's safe. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. The growling filled the home with dread. Laura glanced at the children, their wide eyes shimmering with tears. There was no denying it, time was slipping through her fingers. Then, just as the sounds reached a fever pitch, they stopped. An eerie silence enveloped them, dead and suffocating. Laura strained her ears, trying to catch any noise, but there was only stillness. Mom? Kyle whimpered again. Wait, she hushed, feeling a prickling awareness, like fingers tracing her spine. What had happened? Why was it so silent? Suddenly, a soft scratching sound began at the door, clawing against the wood as though something was biding its time. Heart racing, Laura felt terror gnaw at her stomach. What were they up against? Could she even protect her children from this evil? Just as the scratching intensified, the closet door rattled violently. Mom! Kyle shrieked, the panic breaking past the barrier of silence. Laura yanked open the door, stumbling backward into the room. They were met with darkness. The man stood there, eyes wide and horrified. It's here, he murmured, barely audible over the sudden pounding in their chests. What do you mean, here? And then she heard heavy footsteps advancing from beyond the walls, reverberating like thunder, closing in on them. She turned to grab her children, but the shadows seemed to writhe. We have to go. But the man shook his head, his face pale and gaunt. There's no escaping it, he whispered. The walls began to pulse with a low thrum, and in that moment, a realization pierced through the dread, perhaps there was nowhere to run. Mom? Kyle's voice cracked, and it crushed her heart. Her breath caught as she realized, was it fear that was drawing them in? The shadows whispered fervent promises, igniting a primal instinct to flee or fight. But where? What would be the first step, one toward freedom or deeper into despair? The advance of the footsteps quickened, a relentless predator chasing its prey. Now! She shouted. But the shadows were waiting. Would they flee into the darkness or confront the horror hunting them? With nowhere to hide, they had to make a choice. As the door burst open, the world beyond was a swirling chaos of shadow and claw. Would they face it together, or would it tear them apart? The moment held its breath, poised on the edge of something terrifying. The darkness swirled, an endless void where shapes lurked, twisting and contorting just beyond reach. Laura's heart thundered. She could feel the air crackle with tension, as though even the atmosphere held its breath, waiting. Mom! Please! Kyle cried, the desperation clawing at his voice. Laura's grip tightened around his little hand, pulling him closer as she could almost feel the shadows reaching for them. The man's fearful gaze locked onto hers, a silent acknowledgement of their fate. Stay behind me! She barked, shifting into protector mode. She didn't know the source of the terror, but whatever it was, it had them in its sights. The heavy footsteps outside grew louder, and she could hear something breathing, ragged and hungry. Megan, Kyle, we need to move. Now! She darted toward the door, half dragging them behind her, but the shadows pulsed like a living thing, resisting their escape. Which way? The man's voice trembled, and that doubt injected poison into her confidence. Every direction whispered danger. Just, anywhere but here. She shouted as she shoved the flimsy door open, bracing herself for whatever nightmare awaited them. They stumbled into the hallway, the house becoming a labyrinth of fear. An oily darkness clung to the walls, the air thick with something acrid that burned her throat. The oppressive silence remained, broken only by their hurried breaths and the echo of footsteps, her heart racing in sync with them. Something lurked just out of sight. As they dashed forward, Laura turned her head just in time to catch a glimpse of movement at the far end of the hall. A figure, vague and galloping like a nightmare, melted into the shadows before she could grasp its shape. "Did you see that?" she whispered, panic threatening to choke her words. "Mom." Kyle squeezed her hand tighter, his small body nearly shaking free. "Keep moving," she urged, pushing them onward, terror eclipsing rational thought. They raced past pictures on the wall flanked by shadows, faces warped and twisted in grim laughter. The whole house felt alive, mocking them with every step, vibrating with menace. They reached the stairwell and hesitated. The staircase spiraled down into a black maw, darkness beckoning. "We can't go down there. It's just more darkness." Megan's voice shook, and Laura felt a cold sweat trickle down her spine. "Maybe it's safer than staying up here," Laura suggested, fighting the growing dread to sound brave. But the thought gnawed at her, each choice felt steeped in doom. "What if it follows us?" Kyle whimpered. "It has to be better than waiting for it to find us, right?" she said, but the words felt like breaking glass in her throat. Just then, a noise rang out near the hallway, a low growl echoing off the walls, vibrating deep in their bones. The hairs on Laura's arms stood straight, her instincts screaming to flee. They had no choice. "Hold hands." She ushered the kids down the stairs, the grip of fear hot against her resolve. As they descended, the shadows clutched the wooden banister, whispering in a language of fear a sinister chant that echoed her thoughts. Come to us, come to us." They reached the bottom, breathless. The floor felt cold underfoot, and there was a subtle tremor beneath them, a heartbeat of the house. As fear clawed at her insides, Laura looked back up the stairs, expecting to see the shadow looming, ready to pounce. That's when she heard it above the growling a voice, indistinct yet familiar, breaking into her consciousness like ice water. "Help me," a plea whispered to the air, clawing at her heartstrings. Megan's eyes widened. "Mom! What was that?" "I don't know," Laura murmured, glancing back toward the staircase. "But we need to keep moving." Yet doubt crept into her mind. Who called out? Would they really find safety, or would they plunge deeper into madness? A sudden crash resounded from the upper floor, shaking the walls around them. The shadows recoiled like startled snakes, drawing back for a brief moment, revealing the barren room behind them, a flicker of hope. "Run!" she yelled, propelling them into the opening to the unknown. But as they crossed the threshold, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that the nightmare was just beginning. Behind them, she felt the weight of 1,000 eyes watching, waiting to strike. "What have we done?" Kyle screamed. The question echoed, reverberating through the silence, pulling them deeper into the abyss. What if to survive meant embracing the dark? The corridor stretched before them, a gaping maw of shadows, swallowing the faint glow of their fading hopes. Laura led the way, urging the kids to hurry, her heart pounding like a war drum. The cold, slick floor underfoot felt oddly alive, pulsing with each frantic step. "Megan, stick close!" Laura shouted, feeling the weight of their peril claw at her throat. She could sense something uncurling from the darkness, growing bolder as they moved deeper into the house. "Mom, I can't," Kyle whimpered, his small voice barely rising above the chill that wrapped around them. He stumbled, and Laura reached back, pulling him up just in time. "They're coming!" Megan exclaimed, her eyes wide with terror. Nothing was behind them, yet the insistent feeling of being hunted pressed down on Laura like a suffocating blanket. The sound of growling echoed, now intermingled with distant, mocking laughter that ricocheted off the walls. Each step shed more of her bravado. They were teetering on the edge of panic. "Keep going. Don't look back," she urged, though every nerve in her body begged to glance behind. The shadows felt like a living entity, shifting around them, as if the house itself was alive, a predator with a taste for fear. They stumbled into a room, a vast, shadowy expanse filled with hulking shapes. Chests of forgotten belongings stood silent, thick dust baking them in a layer of neglect. But there was no time to investigate. Laura fought against the urge to freeze in horror and pushed forward. "What if it's hiding in here?" Kyle whispered, his voice quivering as he peered into the gloom. The fleeting hope that this room might hide shelter flickered out. Everything felt encased in a thick, oppressive dread. Laura's breaths came in short bursts as she scanned the room, and that when she saw it, a broken mirror, shards lying scattered on the ground, glinting ominously as they caught the dim light. "Mom, move!" Megan cried, pointing toward a shadow that drifted just outside the range of their vision. It lurked like a thief, waiting to pounce. "Over here." Laura beckoned, her voice strained, as she darted toward a doorway that was barely visible next to an ancient wardrobe. As they hurried through, Megan let out a horrified gasp. "What was that?" She stopped mid-step, her finger trembling as she pointed into the shadows behind them. There, in the reflection of the broken glass, silhouettes twisted and writhed, faces contracted into expressions of terror and despair. "Keep going." Laura pressed, panic flooding her veins. Sure, the darkness was compelling, but it was the mirroring figures that held her gaze as she felt tendrils of dread coil around her heart. Each face reflected a memory, memories that weren't hers, but felt eerily familiar. "Mom, please!" Kyle cried again, pulling at her hand, and in that instant, the shadow lunged at them through the doorway they were about to step into. It was impossibly fast, a grotesque blend of dread and rage, and a scream tore from Kyle's throat. "Now!" Laura shouted, lunging forward, dragging her children into the next room just as the darkness enveloped their last refuge behind them. They fell into another corridor, longer, quieter, though the silence was deafening. The air crackled. Each of them gasped for breath, the reality of their nightmare sinking in deeper with each heartbeat. "We can't stop," Laura panted, adrenaline racing, the kind of fear that boiled her blood and froze her veins at the same time. Suddenly, a whimper broke the silence, echoing down the hall, a sob so poignant it lanced through Laura's heart. "Mom!" It was a faint wail, one she recognized all too well. "Is that?" Megan started, eyes wide, darting with confusion. "Just keep moving." Laura barked, digging her heels into the unfamiliar ground as dread clawed at her throat. Yet her mind spun, a memory from long ago came rushing forward. Was it Kyle calling her? Or was it something else entirely? The corridor bled light as they pressed on, but the shadows grew bolder, clawing at their heels. "I want my dad!" Kyle shouted, tears streaming down his cheeks. Breaking Laura's resolve, with no end in sight, a deafening crash erupted behind them, a door bashing against the wall. The shadows thrummed with energy, closing in. "Run!" Laura screamed. "To the end!" But in the cacophony of their rapid escape, the shadows seemed to change form, shifting and weaving. They were no longer just dark, they morphed into faces, mouths gaping open, whispering words from twisted memories, words that pulled at her sanity. "Come back to us!" Laura's breath hitched. What were they? Why did she recognize them? The question clawed at her mind as they drew closer to the vague light ahead, and that voice, was it a plea? Or a lure? "Run until we can't anymore," she urged, but her own certainty dwindled. Whatever awaited them at the end, she knew it would demand a price. And as they reached the threshold, she felt the darkness surge behind them, hungry and relentless. "What do we do now?" Megan gasped, as they clung together, but Laura didn't have an answer. She could only sense the truth twisting in her mind. Was there escape, or was the darkness just part of something bigger? With the first glimpse of freedom looming ahead, another whisper clawed at her consciousness. Embrace us. Would they find salvation, or become another voice in the shadows? Laura gripped Kyle and Megan tighter, facing the unknown as they stepped through. What awaited them on the other side? The moment they crossed the threshold, the world twisted violently around them. They landed on a floor that was not the familiar wood of the house but a cold, hard surface that felt strangely liquid, almost like a slick skin that pulsated beneath their feet. Laura instinctively jerked backward, almost losing her balance, but Kyle and Megan clung to her, their eyes wide with disbelief. "Where are we?" Megan whispered, fear cracking her voice like glass, as they spun in a frenzied circle, searching for something, anything that felt real and safe. The light that illuminated this new place wasn't warm, it was a sickly green hue that danced erratically around them, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch out and reach for the children. It reminded Laura of the glow of a dying star, eerie and haunting. "Stay close," Laura commanded, her heart thrumming in her chest like a bird trapped in a cage. They could see curved walls surrounding them, walls that appeared to ripple as though they were made of water, shimmering and distorted. She felt the urgency pressing on her, tight as a noose. Ahead, a corridor loomed. The green light flickered ominously, and the shadows writhed, forming indecipherable shapes that flickered at the edges of her vision. They were not the only ones here. She could feel it. Mom. Kyle tugged at her hand, his voice barely above a whisper. "What if we don't belong here?" Laura felt a chill slide down her spine. "We belong together," she insisted fiercely, though doubt gnawed at her insides. The urge to protect them intensified with every slow movement she made. Each step into the corridor felt like stepping into an abyss. Just then, laughter echoed through the air, a cacophony of cruel mirth, catching them off guard. It rolled over them like thick fog, every bright note a taunt. "Run, run, little ones," the voices played like a haunting melody, sinister in its cheer. "Embrace the truth, Mom." Megan shrieked, pressing against Laura, her little body trembling. The shadows surrounding them seemed to shrink and expand, pulsating in rhythm with their terror. "Forward, keep moving," Laura urged, but deep down, she felt lost. The oppressive atmosphere tightened around her throat, squeezing out breath. They emerged into another chamber, larger this time, and in the center stood a figure draped in shadow. Laura's heart raced as the face shifted and morphed, a grotesque caricature of countless souls wrapped in pain and threat. It grinned at them, a wide, unsettling smile that split its face, revealing rows of jagged teeth. "Welcome back," it hissed, the voice echoing around them, bathing the air in unease. "You've come to find what you lost. Get away from us," Laura shouted, instinct kicking in, pushing her children behind her as she squared her shoulders. Suddenly, images flashed in her mind, faces from the mirror that she had so desperately tried to forget, cries for help merging with this new horror. They weren't just echoes, they were memories. "Let them go," Laura screamed, though her voice wavered. Each word tasted like ash on her tongue. The figure tilted its head, and the shadows writhed around it, twisting into something more menacing. "We are here to guide you. To free you. Just step into the light." Behind Laura, she could feel Kyle shaking. "Mom, I want to go home," he cried, his voice cracking, panic crystallizing in his tone. The figure gestured toward a shimmering portal off to the side. Shapes flickered inside, images of family gatherings, laughter, happiness. "Or you can choose to stay." Laura fought back tears, a violent knot in her throat. "We don't belong to you. We want to leave." The words felt fragile, almost futile, as the shadows within the chamber hummed in agreement. As she turned, trying to think of a way out, the ground began to tremble, fractures snaking along the surface below them. "You can't escape us," the figure howled, its voice distorting as it reached for them. The shadows shot forward, tendrils closing in, wrapping around her wrists like chains. "Run!" Laura shouted. The children scrambled backward, but the shadows were relentless, pulling at them, grasping at their fears. The portal flickered with urgency, light beckoning them amid the encroaching darkness. Laura pivoted and caught Megan's gaze, filled with terror and uncertainty. Her heart pounded like thunder, and she realized with a jolt this place fed on their fears. Together. We move together. She grabbed both of her kids' hands, feeling the heat of their panic echo against her own, and with one desperate pull, they raced toward the flickering light, the laughter morphing into a furious roar behind them. The shadows writhed, hungry for their despair, but just as they neared the portal, the ground beneath them began to collapse, splintering into a chasm that yawned below. "Laura!" Kyle cried out, helplessness haunting his voice. "Jump!" She shouted, adrenaline coursing through her veins. The light above pulsed, brighter and more inviting, yet she felt the dark mass drawing closer, its icy fingers grazing her skin. She pulled the kids tighter against her, their breaths mingling with hers in a frantic rhythm. Would they leap to salvation or fall victim to the shadows below? The decision loomed, desperate and terrifying, and with a collective gasp, they leaped into the light. What awaited them on the other side? The leap into the light felt like plunging into icy water. A violent rush enveloped them, constricting and overwhelming before the world exploded into illumination. They tumbled forward, landing in a new space, scattered like leaves in a storm. Laura panted, her heart racing as she looked around. They were in a deserted park, eerily quiet and cloaked in a mist that swirled around their ankles. The air was cold, biting at their skin, and the stark contrast to the otherworldly glow they had just escaped was unsettling. Muffled whispers floated through the stillness, sending shivers down her spine. "Megan! Kyle!" She called, her voice breaking through the fog. She could see them a few feet away, their faces pale and eyes wide. "Mom, where are we?" Kyle's voice trembled, the innocence of a child lost in an eternal nightmare. Laura surveyed their surroundings. The park appeared familiar yet distorted, like a memory twisted by fear. With its rusted swings swaying in a non-existent breeze and a cracked slide that loomed like a sentinel of despair, it was an abandoned realm suspended between joy and dread. Shadows draped over everything, contorting into figures that watched from the edges, lurking just out of sight. "Stay close," Laura said, her stomach twisting into knots as she took a step forward, every instinct screaming that they had landed in the aftermath of something terrible. The soft whispers began to grow clearer, coalescing into fragmented words that hinted at past grievances, regrets, and sorrows. "Do you see them?" One voice sighed, weary and hollow. "They can't escape. What do they want?" Megan dared to inquire, her tiny frame shivering visibly in the gloom. "I don't know." Laura's throat felt tight. "But we need to find a way out." As they moved deeper into the park, the laughter of children echoed like shards of glass, piercing the air and filling it with an eerie sense of longing. Each step they took felt heavier, as if the ground itself was reluctant to let them go. "Mom, what if we never leave?" Kyle's voice was a whisper, laced with fear. "We'll find a way," Laura replied, the determination in her voice battling against the overwhelming anxiety creeping up her spine. Just then, a chilling breeze swept through the park, rustling the leaves, and with it came a whisper, sinister and alluring. "Stay with us." The shadows grew bolder, stretching toward them like skeletal fingers. Laura felt the hairs on her arms rise as the laughter intensified, shifting from innocent joy to something far more sinister. An overwhelming sense of being trapped clutched at her. "Run!" she shouted, adrenaline surging as she grabbed her children's hands. They sprinted past the swings, hearts pounding in synchronized terror. Then, without warning, the ground beneath the slide buckled. It split open, revealing a dark, gaping maw that beckoned them with a rush of chilling air. "Mom! It's going to swallow us!" Kyle screamed, his eyes wide with panic. "Keep going," she urged. They darted past the opening, desperate not to lose faith, but a shadow shifted before them, blocking their way. It was amorphous, a swirl of darkness swirling, twisting and turning. why do you run? It crooned, its tone deceptively soft, a shiver of warmth wrapped in malice. You're already home. No. Laura shouted, defiance igniting within her. This isn't home. The shadow lunged, billowing forward to envelop them, and just as it seemed they would be consumed, the world around them darkened, leaving only the echo of memories swirling in the air. Primal fear danced in their eyes as they collided once more, suddenly suspended in a void of nothingness. Words floated through the darkness. Will you accept the past or will you fight for the future? As Laura clutched her children close, she confronted the dark tendrils wrapping around them. Each second stretched into eternity, thick with doubt and despair. Would they break free from the clutches of this forsaken realm, or would they become part of its haunting chorus? And deep within the shadows, the laughter shifted again, more sinister than before. Whispering, the truth will set you free. What truth awaited them in this haunting expanse, and could they find the strength to face it? The darkness whispered like the breath of the damned, wrapping around Laura and her children like a suffocating shroud. Time felt frozen, each heartbeat echoing in the chasm of fear. Her grip tightened on their hands, the warmth of their small fingers grounding her in the all-consuming void. Suddenly, the darkness flickered, and a light broke through, not the blinding brilliance they had leaped into before, but a flickering glow that felt wrong, tortured. It pulsated like a heart struggling for life, illuminating twisted figures that writhed in the shadows. Mom, what's happening? Megan's voice trembled, panic threading through her words. We're still here, Laura stammered, her heart racing, the edges of terror fraying her sanity. We have to move. She pulled Kyle and Megan in the direction of the light, each step feeling like wading against a tide of unseen weight. The ground groaned beneath them, and dark tendrils snaked upward, grasping at their ankles, trying to pull them back into the cold embrace of the shadows. Let go! Laura cried, straining against the pull, fueled by the desperate need to protect her children. With a final wrench, they burst through the threshold of light. They stumbled into a bizarre, distorted landscape, surreal and unnaturally vivid. The sky ran with crimson colors that bled into dark clouds, while forces unknown loomed and swirled angrily overhead. We're not home. This can't be real. Kyle cried, his eyes wide, the boy struggling to understand the nightmare unfolding around them. Laura looked up, dread expanding in her chest. It's a trap. Something wants us to believe we're safe. As if summoned by her fear, the ground quaked and shadows materialized around them. This shape grew larger, twisting into a creature made of malice, a composite of every worry she'd ever harbored, a monstrous reflection of her own fears. It's all so familiar, Megan whispered, eyes brimming with tears as she peered up at the looming specter. Mom, it looks like us. No. This isn't who we are. Laura shouted defiantly, instinctively stepping in front of her children. Her heart raced as she felt the ground tremble beneath her, threatening to open and reveal every regret, every heartache she had buried. You can't run from yourself, the creature said, its voice low and echoing, slinking closer, wrapping sadness around her with its presence. Accept the truth, become at peace. No. She gritted her teeth, determination rising. We're not here for this. We're here to fight. The creature hissed, flickering like a flame caught in the wind. A surge of energy shot through Laura, ignited by love for her children. Fight it together. She shouted, reaching for her children. They joined hands, and suddenly, a jolt of warmth surged through their clasped fingers. Light pulsed bright, radiating from the space between them, pushing back against the darkness that threatened to drown them. The shadowy figure shrieked, recoiling as tendrils of light struck it, illuminating the fear it fed upon. Keep holding on. Laura shouted, the glow intensifying as they focused on one single thought, escape, but then, clawing up from the depths, came a chilling gurgle, a voice barely audible. You can't escape what you've buried. It reverberated in her mind like an unyielding echo of the past. Dark memories flickered before her eyes, reminders of losses and failures. Don't listen. Kyle yelled, fighting back tears. The shadows yanked at him, and for a moment, Laura felt the weight of despair almost pull her away. In a sudden burst, the landscape shifted, swirling with colors and forms that almost made her dizzy. They were no longer just in a park, but trapped in a labyrinth of their own making, with walls that pulsed like dark hearts. "Will this ever end?" Megan whispered, a note of pleading in her voice. "There has to be a way out." Laura replied, trying to drown out the creeping shadows. They faced the creature, which was still trying to envelop them, growing larger, feasting on their vulnerabilities. Suddenly, a memory rose fiercely in her mind: their last family gathering, laughter ringing through the room, the warmth of love wrapping around them like a blanket. "That love, that's what will save us," she shouted, channeling every fond moment into their light. The creature shrieked, its form distorting wildly, shadows writhing in agony. As their brightness burned hotter, scorching the edges of darkness, the shadows shrank back, howling in rage. "Hold on to that light," Laura commanded, pushing forward, but just as the darkness began to evaporate, the ground trembled violently. They were losing their footing. Desperation clawed at Laura's heart. The fear of failing her children was suffocating. As the light flickered one last time, a chilling whisper surrounded them. "You can't truly be free." You Haven T faced the darkness within. Would they face the abyss and emerge victorious, or would they be swallowed whole by the shadows? The shadows closed in, sinister whispers clawing at Laura's mind. "Face your fears." Dead echoes encased them in darkness. Every pulse of the ground reverberated with reminders of pain: her late husband's absence, the weight of single motherhood, the eternal worry of inadequacy. The haunting visage of loss loomed like an insatiable predator. "Together!" Laura shouted, locking her gaze onto her children. Their small hands gripped hers tightly, their little hearts pounding in sync with her own. "We will break free." She felt their collective resolve solidify in the air, a warmth that clashed against the cold uncertainty wrapping around them. The creature, a grotesque mirror of despair, surged forward. "You can't hide!" it shrieked, shadows stretching as if they sought to consume them. "Embrace what you fear most." Laura took a breath, forcing herself to remember. "Think of Dad," she yelled, anchoring her memories of warmth, laughter, and love into reality. What would he want? The fog of anguish shivered, tremoring at the mention of those cherished times. Images flickered, moments of family gatherings, the laughter, the joy, the feeling of being whole. In that sacred space of heartbeats and memories, she could see them clearer. "Let us do it," she shouted, summoning courage. The light within began to swell, fueled by the love they had shared, igniting a fire that uncoiled within them. Laura focused, unwilling to let the darkness rewrite their story. And then it happened. A burst of radiance exploded from them, a blinding brilliance that pushed against the encroaching shadows. "Now!" she roared, bolstering her children. In unison, they broke the bonds of despair. "No!" the creature howled, thrashing against the onslaught. The warmth enveloped them, a protective cocoon against the once-consuming darkness. "Mom, hold my hand tighter," Kyle cried, his voice filled with fear yet laced with a brave spark. "I'm here, baby. I'm here. Don't let go." Moments dragged on like knives against their resolve, as the ground shook beneath their feet, threatening to swallow them whole. But they pressed forward, pushing through the dizzying swirl of memories, shadows, and twisted reflections. The foul stench of fear lingered, but it could not encompass their light. With one final push, the radiant force coalesced, growing into a cyclone of warmth and love. The shadow shrieked, its grotesque form starting to disintegrate, scattering like ashes in the wind. Laura felt the oppressive weight of the darkness lift, retreating until it faded into mere wisps. With a thunderous roar, the creature shattered, fracturing into echoes of its former self, leaving behind remnants of despair that fluttered into oblivion. Laura could feel it dissipating, making room for hope to surge through her and her children. They stood there, breathless, the air around them crackling with recognition, a tangible essence of freedom. The landscape shifted, the park distorting, melting away until they stood at the cusp of vibrant sunlight, a promise of a new dawn. "Mom?" Megan asked cautiously, peeking at the bright expanse emerging beyond the tendrils of shadows. "Did we do it?" "Yes," Laura exclaimed, wrapping her arms tightly around them, feeling the radiant warmth of the sun wash over them. "We did it together." They stumbled forward, away from the remnants of what had bound them. The light enveloped them, brighter and more welcoming than ever before. Its warmth seeped into their bones, igniting every hope that had been buried deep. "I love you both so much," Laura said, swallowing tears of relief and joy as they took those final steps into their new reality. She could already hear the laughter of children playing in the distance, the rhythmic sound of life returning to their world. "Mom? Will we be okay now?" Kyle asked with a tremor, glancing back, still unsure. "I promise you, my sweet boy," she said, wiping away the remnants of fear. "No more shadows, just us, just love." As they embraced the warm light, the sun rising like a beacon of hope, Laura finally felt whole again. The weight of grief and fear slid off her shoulders, replaced by a future woven with love, laughter, and the unbreakable bond that held them together, and sometimes, just sometimes, facing darkness simply meant finding the light within. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm and show your support. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this breathtaking ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans understand the importance of rallying support for the channel through these actions.